caught fire just north of Birmingham at the Great Bar exit junction 7. In Norfolk, south of Loddon, the A146 remains shut in Hales and Stockton off the A143 following a multi-vehicle collision. On the western stretch of the M25, the inside lane is closed anti-clockwise for recovery work after a car caught fire just before the M40. Long queues to 18 and Maple Cross. And in Suffolk, Trinity Avenue, the A154 blocked southbound through Felixstowe after a lorry overturned. Trains are suspended from Leicester to Peterborough and from Leicester to Nottingham following problems with the signals at Syston. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could win big this summer. First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs & Co. Coming up tonight. Are these two the best we've got? That was a question last night at the Sunak v Starmer debate. Harsh or fair? You tell me. And Angela Rayner says that she'll empty the migrant hotels in a year and make all councils take their fair share of migrants. What do you think to that strategy? Will it work? Would you support it? Also, another doctor's strike in the middle of a heat wave, in the middle of a general election campaign. Really? Do you still support this? And do you actually think it will be resolved by the incoming government? Also, do you think there should be a legal right for us all to switch off from work outside of work hours? Your thoughts? All of that and more, but first, tonight's 6 o'clock news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. I'm Polly Middlehurst, and this is the latest from the GB Newsroom, where one person in England has died in the ongoing E. coli outbreak, and it is, they think, linked to salad. That's according to the UK Health Security Agency. It comes after a recent outbreak which saw 86 people admitted to hospital. That's according to figures released last week. A number of food manufacturers have had to recall their sandwiches, their wraps and their ready salads sold in major supermarkets and retail chains over fears they could be linked to possible contamination. The Health Security Agency linking it now to lettuce in the sandwiches. In other news, the number of Metropolitan Police officers under investigation over allegedly placing bets on the timing of the election has risen to at least 7. The force says one protection officer assigned to the Prime Minister was arrested last week and has since been bailed. A further 6 officers, though, have now been identified as having placed bets on the election as well. Sir Keir Starmer has said today a Labour government would work with whoever's in power in France on tackling illegal migrant journeys across the English Channel from France. Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak returned to the campaign trail today after clashing over illegal immigration and the betting row on a TV debate last night. The Prime Minister says the country would be in danger under a Labour government being led by a leader who has no plan to stop the boats.
Keir Starmer changes his mind on almost every major position that he has taken. Right? And times that we're living in, you need leadership which has the courage of its convictions. That's what I have. You have to ask yourself, why is he not telling you his plan for the country, what he wants to do? Because he probably doesn't think you're going to like it when you hear it. Right? We know, as you saw last night, those of you that were watching the debate, absolutely no answers about how to tackle immigration. Right? I've got a plan, we're bringing immigration down, we've got a plan to stop the boats. He would make us the soft touch of Europe when it comes to that issue.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer responded, telling GB News that the issue of illegal migration was much more than just a border issue.
Record numbers of people are coming here in small boats. He's lost control of our borders, literally lost control, not only of the numbers that are coming, but also who's coming. And so this is not just a border issue, it's a national security issue. The deterrent is smashing the gangs that are running this vile trade so that nobody gets into a boat to cross the channel. The Prime Minister is simply interested in a gimmick, the Rwanda scheme, for people who've already arrived here, a few hundred people.
It's Keir Starmer. Now, the former Newcastle United owner Sir John Hall has switched his support to Reform UK after previously donating tens of thousands of pounds to the Conservative Party. He was cheered on at a Reform speech near Sunderland, where party leader Nigel Farage was speaking. Mr Farage said it was a privilege to welcome Sir John to the family and said he'd made a substantial donation to the Reform Party's campaign. He said he feels like the Tories have let him down.
The Conservative Party has let me down. They've been a failure for the last many years, for the last 14 years, and they don't speak now for my English is my way of life, which I feel is under threat. And I looked around, basically, who I find to speak for me, and the Reform Party, I feel, and Nigel's the only ones who are going to speak about saving my English culture.
Junior doctors in England are walking out in the 11th time in almost a year. The 5-day strike they're planning continues in their long-running dispute with the government over pay. They're asking for a 35% pay rise, which Labour has said is a non-starter. But they say industrial action will take place over the summer if negotiations don't move forward. The BMA is now saying it's already held talks with the Labour Party. Let's focus now on the search for the missing British teenager Jay Slater in Tenerife. His mother says some of the money raised by a crowdfunding appeal will now be withdrawn to help in the search for her son. The appeal so far has raised more than £36,000 online, and the search for 19-year-old Jay Slater has entered its 11th day after he went missing while on holiday in Tenerife. And yesterday, Spanish police deployed helicopters above ground and sniffer dogs on the ground in that mountainous area of the island as the search for Jay Slater goes on. England's football squad has been training for their first knockout game against Slovakia at the Euros. That's taking place on Sunday. The Three Lions top their group before getting into the knockout stages of the competition. They'll be without their midfielder, though, Phil Foden. He's had to leave training and return to the UK for the birth of his third child. We wish him well. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Polly Middlehurst. More for you in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that, Polly. I am Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock. Interesting few stories in those headlines. That Jay Slater story, very, very bizarre. It seems to get bizarre, more bizarre by the day, if you ask me. What do you make to it all? Have you donated to that crowdfunding campaign? I'll be interested to hear if you have. What was your motivation? What do you think to the search so far? Also, you know, we can't win in this life, can we? We're told to eat healthily, get your salads in, get your 5 a day, you go out, you get your salads. Now you've got this whole E. coli thing popping up. What on earth is this world coming to? Is there anything these days that could just be healthy, positive, good for us? Get in touch, tell me your thoughts. I'm with you till 7 alongside me tonight. I've got the former Tory minister and a new face to this programme, Robert Halfon, and alongside him, the former Labour minister, Bill Rammell. Good evening to both of you. We love a new face on this programme, so you are very welcome tonight. And you two used to fight it out, didn't you, over the same seat?
We did. I beat him twice and then he beat me once.
Yeah, but I'm the first MP to leave Harlow voluntarily, because I've voluntarily stepped down.
Oh, getting it in early.
We're frenemies.
Yeah.
Frenemies? Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about that, actually, because, of course, what we've all ran, haven't we, in political campaigns now, it does get very nasty, doesn't it? So it's quite interesting that you guys have been able to stay somewhat friendly.
Yeah, well, that was after.
Right.
It wasn't quite the same at the time.
Yeah, at the beginning it was more adversarial, but I think as we've gone along, I think we've developed a mutual respect.
Right.
And I think you can very strongly disagree with somebody while still acting civilly and engaging with them.
And Bill was a very, dare I say this, he was a very good MP for Harlow before I turned up. So I used to learn from him and thought, if I got in, I have to do what he does.
Well, it's going to get like a mutual scratching society, and you've done it well.
The check's in the post, though.
Well, I don't know. Are you in Harlow? Because actually, you can tell me. Who do you reckon was your best MP out of these two? Get in touch. Don't be shy. I do want to know what you think. I'll tell them who wins that little battle at the end of this programme. Get in touch with me all the usual ways. You know how by now. You can email gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to the website gbnews.com/yoursay, or of course you can tweet or X me wherever you're watching or listening. Don't forget you can take me on the radio with you if you need to pop out tonight. You are very welcome indeed tonight. So did you watch it, the debate last night? First and foremost, did both of you watch it?
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
In its entirety?
Yeah, 100%.
Did you? I will make a confession. I started to watch it and then I just thought, ugh, really? I've heard all of this. I found it a little bit dull, so I switched over and I watched an alternate hustings instead, featuring actually 2 people from this programme. Matt Goodwin was on it, Peter Hitchens was on it, and I watched different perspectives, and I found that a lot more interesting than the same old,
Well, you missed
same
an
old.
electrifying moment, because Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said to Starmer, you say you're going to negotiate with countries and you're going to send them back, and he said, are you really going to negotiate? Because most of these migrants come from Iran and Afghanistan. You're really going to renegotiate with the Ayatollahs and the Taliban. That was an electrifying moment of the debate.
Was it? Well, don't forget that Jonathan Ashworth, he was pushed on that, wasn't he, a couple of days ago on a programme over in the BBC by Victoria Derbyshire. We debated that, actually, last night because, of course, nobody thinks that they're going to do that. So I've noticed now there's been a softening of language, people saying, actually, they're going to create returns agreements with the EU. I did watch some of the debate, I will confess. I thought one of the most interesting points was where he was asked a question about, are you going to stand up for women's rights? And Keir Starmer kind of waffled around it. Rishi Sunak went on about having 2 daughters. And I was shouting at the screen. I was going, that's not what they're talking about. What they're talking about is protecting single-sex spaces. And then, of course, there was a secondary follow-up question. We kind of got there a little bit. But I can tell you, one of the questions that's captivating people's comments and thoughts today, did you hear the guy that basically asked, are these 2 the best we've got? If you missed it, watch.
Are you 2 really the best we've got to be the next Prime Minister of our great country?
What do you think to that? Harsh or fair? What do you think to that?
Look, I get people are frustrated with both the political leaders. But I used to have a big poster in my office in the Department of Education when I was a minister, and it was from a great American president called Teddy Roosevelt. And can I just read this quote?
You may.
And he said, it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how a strong man stumbles or whether doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who actually strives to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And the reason why I read that quote out is because it is easy to criticise from the sidelines. It is easy to say, a bit like Statler and Waldorf from The Muppet Show, to say, what a terrible show. Yet these people, Starmer, whether it's my guy, Rishi Sunak, they're out every day. They're trying to do the best for what they believe for their country, even if I don't agree with what Starmer says. And I think people should give them a little bit more slack and understand that it's much easier to criticise from an armchair. It's much harder to actually do the stuff when you're in government.
Bill?
I think that's true. And look, Michelle, one of the things when you're liberated from frontline politics, you can actually candidly and forcefully give your own view. I thought the guy's question was frankly quite arrogant and dismissive. And for a man, he acknowledged he voted for Boris Johnson in 2019. Let's just say his judgment about good political leadership, I think, is slightly off the money. Let me be even-handed, however. Whatever you think of the politics of Starmer and Sunak, they're both serious, diligent and hard-working. And we live in times where I think we need that kind of leadership. After Johnson, after Truss, crashing the economy, flamboyance, exuberance, we need serious, hard-working people who are going to put the country to right. And I think if you had a charismatic politician coming forward now, I'm really not sure they would cut the mustard.
What I want is a Prime Minister. I'm less worried about charisma. What I want is a Prime Minister who's going to solve complex problems. And what I've known from Rishi Sunak is that he does solve complex problems, whether it was the Northern Ireland Agreement, whether it was dealing with Scotland and the trans stuff that Nicola Sturgeon was doing, whether it's sorting out the economy. If you remember what state the economy was in just 2 years ago, we're not out of the woods yet, but it's a lot better with inflation down at 2%. I want somebody who's going to solve complex problems. And
I know, but hold on a minute, because this whole bringing inflation down to 2% and all the rest of it, that wasn't massively within the government's control, in the same way that when inflation was sky high, they were very quick to say it's outside of our hands. It's things like energy prices, Ukraine, whatever.
But if we had given in to all the public sector pay rises, inflation, the demands on the public sector, the inflation would have gone up. We're also amongst the fastest growth in Europe. The energy prices are coming down. He said that we have to deal with inflation. If he messed up the economy, inflation would have gone up. And by the way, when inflation was high, everyone was blaming the government. So when the government lowers it, they can't just say, well, it's nothing to do with him. He made it very clear that it was his target to cut inflation, and he's done that.
But he's not delivering, Robert. NHS waiting lists are spiralling out of control. We've got the net immigration numbers 3 times higher than when Labour left office. And I think Rishi Sunak's problem, and I think he is a decent, serious person, but I don't think he's up to top-level leadership. And he comes across as detached. One of the most revealing things for me from the Sky News debate, the immediate after-debate poll gave it to Keir Starmer 2-1. But on the question of in touch with ordinary people, Keir won 71% to 13%. I think that's a big problem for Rishi Sunak. He's not seen as in touch with ordinary people.
Any government coming out of COVID and the COVID pandemic, the NHS waiting lists are all going to go up. They're going up by millions.
They were up before the pandemic.
Massively increased because of the COVID pandemic. Millions and millions of people who couldn't get their basic treatments because of what went on during COVID, and we're facing the consequences of that now. So, and every government across Europe that was in power during COVID has faced the same kind of difficulties, and also challenges, political challenges from the public, who, of course, are frustrated with the cost of living challenges and the aftermath of COVID.
But all governments face huge external events. I mean, towards the end of our period, we faced the world banking crisis. Yes, you faced Ukraine. Yes, you faced the COVID pandemic. But people judge parties over their record in office. And if you take the NHS as an example, when we left office, the maximum waiting time for an operation was 18 weeks. Today, it's over 18 months, and people know that from their everyday experience.
I know, but Bill, I think people in Labour have got a bit of front, really, and we'll come on to the NHS a little bit later on in the programme, because, of course, you've got the junior doctors' strikes again. But when I hear Labour bashing the Tories, I just look and I think, I don't know how you dare, because when you look at Wales and the situation in Wales, which is, of course, primarily Labour-run, I'm looking at some ONS data that came out, I think, yesterday or the day before. When you look at numbers of people that have been waiting more than 52 weeks for pre-planned care, it's 9 times higher in Wales than in England.
But
So I think you've got a bit of a cheek.
I haven't got a cheek. It's driven by the financial settlement. That's the overriding issue. And the real comparison is not Wales, it's the UK as a whole. And under the last Labour government...
That's a very convenient thing. You see, Labour should be holding up Wales as a, look at this, everyone. This is our kind of, you know, it's the utopia. We've had control of this place. Look at how wonderfully we've done that. And then when I push it to you and say to you, it's actually quite bad comparably to England, then you go, oh, no, don't look at that bit. Look at the UK as a whole.
Hold on, Michelle. It's a small country of 3 million people. You compare like for like, and on virtually every indicator of the National Health Service, the record of the last Labour government is hugely better than this one. 18 weeks plays 18 months.
It was adjusted for population,
Right,
so that was already taken care of.
18 weeks plays 18 months. And when we left office, the NHS had the highest satisfaction ratings in its history.
Well,
they're rock bottom now.
I will come back to the NHS, everyone.
You're always willing to celebrate good things that you say that Labour have done in Wales, but when it comes to the NHS and their incredibly poor performance, you say, oh, it's nothing to do with them, mate. It's
Indeed.
A small size.
But don't worry, because we shall come back to the NHS. I'm interested, why do you think it's arrogant from the gentleman in the audience to say, are these two the best we've got? What's arrogant about that?
Well, it's a bit like Robert's quote from Teddy Roosevelt. You know, it's the dismissal of people who are in the arena trying to improve things and make things better. And, you know, this was a guy, after the debate, he acknowledged he voted for Boris Johnson, who, in my view, is the biggest charlatan and liar we've ever had as Prime Minister. So I think his judgment on what amounts to good leadership is seriously flawed.
Well, this was a fellow who was called Robert Blackstock. He was actually on GB News this morning. He was asked about that question. Listen.
Really answer any of the questions specifically, and that is what I think really annoys the British public, that our politicians, they say an awful lot of words, but they don't mean anything. And we haven't got anybody that's got any charisma. You know, if you're on the world stage, you know, representing the UK, then you've got to have something that the foreign journalists and the foreign politicians say, we know who that is, it's the British Prime Minister.
One of my viewers, Maria, she just got in touch and said that fella in the audience, the one you just heard there, Robert Blackstock, she said, he's a hero. He spoke for me, and from what I hear, most of the country. He definitely wasn't arrogant at all.
Well, you know, it's a judgment. That's the way he came across to me. And I tell you what, right, you know, I'm Labour to my core, and Tony Blair, in my view, is the best Labour leader that we've had, a charismatic figure. But you know what? I think the kind of leadership we need for these times, which are dangerous and serious, is the kind of steady, honest, decent leadership that we'll get from Keir Starmer. I don't think Tony would cut through in this environment.
I know, but when you're talking about Tony Blair, there'll be people at home shouting out about things like Iraq. There'll be people talking about, was it 2004? Well, actually, we're going to come to immigration in just a second after this break, but people will shout back and say one of the reasons that we're in the predicament that we're in now is 2004, the expansion of the EU to the Eastern Bloc. We didn't put any transitional controls at all in place, and therefore we had loads of people flooding the market with cheap labour, and it's caused lots of the problems that we find ourselves in today.
People who came here from Eastern Europe were hard-working and helped within our economy.
But there was no controls. Most other countries, I think there was only about 2 other countries. In fact, actually, you know what? Press pause on this. We're going to do this after the break because we do need to go to a break, but I'm fascinated about this conversation as well. Angela Rayner, she reckons that they're going to get all of these migrants out of hotels in a year and that every single council essentially going to be forced to take their fair share. What do you think to that? See you in 2.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Recent polling suggests dentistry has become the hardest NHS service for patients to access, within NHS treatments still 15% lower than pre-pandemic levels. So a YouGov survey reveals that more than 70% of Brits describe seeing the dentist as difficult, compared with 64% for GPs and 42% for A&E services. One British man, get this, he even took to flying 10,000 miles for dental care, saying the extra time and money spent was far less hassle than trying to get an appointment on the NHS. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs. And a shocking 1/5 of UK adults have also admitted to trying DIY dentistry, including the old trick of tying string around a wobbly tooth and slamming it in the door so it comes out. So, should people be more careful when taking their teeth into their own hands?
That is one of the problems. Obviously, population growth makes it much more difficult for people to access NHS services, but they need to then catch up on the other side with dental services and increase the amount of dentists and access to dentistry, and especially NHS dentistry, obviously.
What's the cut-off age for free dentistry on the NHS?
So it is 18 years old, but there are exemptions around maternity, pregnancy. There's some free care around pregnancy.
We saw some data a few weeks back about the number one cause for child admission into A&E is tooth decay. I mean, that was shocking when I read it.
It's really bad, and what happens is people, kids with multiple decayed teeth, they basically have to be put under general anaesthetic, and then all those rotted teeth have to be extracted under general anaesthetic. Like, if those baby teeth start going crooked, then the adult teeth start going crooked as well. So it is important to look after the baby teeth. It's really important. I think they should make it more central to their policies, definitely.
The People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m, followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain, followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's Trick Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tormini.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello everyone, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. This is Dewbs and Co. Alongside me, my panel, the former Tory Minister Robert Halfon and the former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. In a second, I'll be crossing to our political editor, Christopher Hurt. But in the meantime, you was just saying that you thought that Tony Blair was the best Prime Minister we've ever had. And I was saying to you, I could hear the groans from certain members of my audience from here. And I was pointing out to you things like people will shout back Iraq, people will talk about 2004 and the expansion of the EU and the complete lack of controls. What would you say to that?
You look at the polling evidence, Tony Blair is seen across the political spectrum as one of the best prime ministers that we've had. You talk about the expansion of the EU. We were in the European Union. You could have had transitional protection. We chose not to because we thought there were benefits. And I think there were benefits. The people who came here worked very hard and contributed to our economic growth. But I'm really not going to take lectures from this Conservative government about migration. You know, listening to Sunak last night when he was talking about surrender, you know, net migration is 3 times higher today than it was when the last Labour government was in office. They've completely lost control of the system. Yes, there's been the boats crisis, but it's also because they've not trained British people, they've not paid them enough to take the work, that foreigners are coming in to do.
First of all, under Blair, they said that there would be a small amount of people from Eastern Europe who came, and we had about 800,000 people from Eastern Europe. So when you say take no lectures, it all started, all this stuff, under the Labour Party. And we have been trying every step of the way to bring through legislation to stop migration into the country. The Labour Party have opposed it every step of the way. They opposed Rwanda. They have opposed every single law that we have brought through to try and deal with the backlog, to try and deal. And now Angela Rayner is saying, well, we'll put them all in council houses. We haven't got enough social housing as it is, and she wants to give them to migrants.
Do you know what, Robert? You say you're trying everything that you can. You know, your party... You didn't, but your party effectively campaigned for Brexit and leaving the European Union. No one who voted for Brexit thought your party would let immigration rip in the way that it has. The numbers have gone through the roof. And yes, there were East Europeans in this country who were working incredibly hard. You've replaced them with a whole host of other people who are enormously challenging for us.
Actually, we brought through, for example, we've stopped people bringing in dependents who are international students. There's been a whole range of measures that the government brought in to try and reduce migration. It has
685,000 placed, 250,000 under the last Labour government.
Last year we cut the boats down by 2/3, but the fact is every single measure...
The boat numbers are going up.
Last year they went down by...
And they're going up
by a third.
in this year.
Yeah, but they went down by a third last year. We also cut down the number of Albanians coming through by huge amounts because we made an agreement with the government. We've made agreements with the French. Absolutely, there's a lot more that needs to be done. But if we don't have the Rwanda scheme, you guys get in next week. It's going to be open door policy. If you think it's bad now, it will be much worse because they are waiting on the border of Calais. They are waiting on the border of Calais, all the traffickers, for the green light for Labour to get in so they can pass the boats because they know you're going to, not only now are you going to stop the Rwanda scheme, but according to Angela Rayner, you're going to give them all council houses as well.
Robert, with respect, that's pantomime politics.
It is not.
You know, we are not in favour of open borders. We weren't in favour of open borders under the last... Hold on. We weren't in favour of open borders at the last Labour government. I was a minister at the Foreign Office who worked with my counterpart in the Home Office on a weekly basis to drive down the asylum numbers.
And we made huge agreements. We made significant agreements.
Let's talk about what actually happened. We drove the number of asylum claims down significantly because we engaged seriously. And the things like Rwanda, it will take 300 years to clear the backlog based on Rwanda. That's not a scheme, it's a gimmick.
That's not true. Rwanda is a deterrent. If people know that once they come here they're going to be sent to Rwanda, it will stop the traffickers from sending
even if it works to the maximum extent, 1% of people will go to Rwanda. That is not a deterrent.
You and the Labour Party and the House of Lords did everything they could to stop it every step of the way, and every time we've had to bring in more legislation because you won't even give it a chance to see it working, and it would have worked because it would have been a deterrent.
Do you know what, you and I were talking earlier about why Rishi Sunak chose to go early to the country. I think one of the reasons was he didn't want to be tested on Rwanda when a handful of flights took off and the situation got worse.
Well, I think that I think if we'd got the Rwanda scheme through, and I think if the Conservatives did win the election, it would act as a significant deterrent. And you have no policy to deal with it. You just say you're going to strengthen the border force. Well, we've done that already, but you are offering a green light to the traffickers. And now Angela Rayner has said now she's going to give them a council house.
Well, but sorry, what we're talking about is people who are genuine refugees who've been given the right to settle in this country.
You've already said those who are here...
Are you saying you just put them in a small number of communities around the country and that you create massive community tensions?
What I'm saying is that we need to give priority for social housing for those who are British citizens who have been here, who are waiting on the waiting list for a very long time.
I'm listening intently to this, but I actually think the pair of you, both of your parties, have been an absolute shambles when it comes to immigration. I think you've both been appalling, and I think you've both collectively given rise to the likes of Reform UK. Nigel Farage, for example, he was speaking about this very issue of immigration today. Let's take a listen to him.
It is mass migration on a level that in fact begins not just to divide and damage communities and potentially to set people apart from each other, which is dangerous, but also I think a feeling that perhaps something about our culture is directly under threat. That sense of who we are, and that this is a problem. And that's why I've said from the start, this really should be the immigration election.
You see, and this is the thing for many people, it is the immigration election, and I was just letting you guys thrash it out, but respectfully, I don't think either of you get it. When I'm pointing out to you back in 2004 what happened under the Labour government, you're trying to argue to me that that was some kind of positive thing because loads of Europeans, Eastern Europeans, came here to work. What actually happened was it created wage depression. So you had scenarios where British workers were being massively undercut within their trades, whether it was plumbing or whatever it was. It caused people huge problems when it came to their standard of living. It also accelerated the seeds of discomfort that I would say went on to lead to Brexit. So I think that that was one of the starting points. And you don't seem to think that that was such a bad thing. When it comes to your lot, respectfully, I mean, as Bill says, he's completely gone out of control. And we can talk about Rwanda and whether or not it will work and all the rest of it. If Rishi Sunak was so confident that the Rwanda plan was going to work, he would have waited until the plane was off the ground and had been successful, and then he would have called an election and he would have said, see, look at how successful that was. Well, and he didn't, because he didn't think it's going to work either.
Everybody was saying every 5 minutes, including the Labour Party, call an election, call an election, call an election.
Oh, come off. It was, so he's a baby that called an election.
No, but I mean, you know, it would have had nothing to do, the election had nothing to do with the Rwanda flights. You know, I absolutely am convinced that Rwanda flights would have gone off over the summer if the Conservatives had been in.
It.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
If you're so convinced, why did Rishi Sunak not wait? If you're all so convinced and you all believe it's going to work, and by the way, I'm in your camp, I disagree with you. I actually think it is a deterrent. It should have been allowed to get off the ground. But if you believed in your policy and you believed it was going to happen, why didn't you have the chops then to make it happen and then call the election afterwards?
Because Sunak had had enough.
No, I mean, look, I don't know why, you know, the Prime Minister decided there was a lot of steam to call an election. The Prime Minister decided it, but it had nothing to do with Rwanda. I absolutely believe Rwanda thing that got off, even though the Labour Party, the lawyers and the House of Lords were doing everything possible to stop it. I'm absolutely convinced. Don't forget, the legislation had been passed, the strengthened legislation, and that's what Rishi had said, that absolutely, whatever the foreign courts say, we will still get the Rwanda flights off.
The current Home Secretary described the Rwanda plan as BSHIT crazy, and he was absolutely
well, he's denied that. He's denied that.
With no credibility.
No, he's denied it.
Do you know what, Michelle? I do believe we need some migration. We had that under the last Labour government, but with much smaller numbers. What has happened under this government is the numbers have got out of control. And you played a clip from Nigel Farage. Nigel is a populist. He presents simplistic solutions to complicated problems. You know, he wants to put a 20% tax on businesses who employ foreign workers that they need until we upskill British...
Lots of people think that's a great idea.
Yeah, but until you upskill British workers and pay the wages to enable them to take those jobs, it's not going to work. And if Nigel had his way, our social care system would collapse because it's held up by migrant workers.
I mean, don't make me laugh. The social system would collapse. The social care system is an absolutely diabolical mess because neither of your parties have actually fronted up, grabbed a hold of it and sorted it out. So for decades, we've had an ineffective social care system. So don't come at me and tell me a system that's already broken.
Do you know what? I agree with part of that. I think both parties have failed on social care. But the reality, go into any social care home and there are significant numbers of migrant workers. And if you stop that tomorrow, the system would collapse.
Yeah, and do you know what, as well, everyone will remember, or perhaps you'll remember, tens of thousands of social care workers was made to leave the sector because they didn't want to be injected with something against their will. So we also, and that was thanks to both of these parties, that we ended up in that situation as well. Look, Christopher Hope, our political editor, he joins me now. Christopher Hope, good evening to you. What have you got for us?
Evening, Michelle. Well, it's been a quieter day on the election trail today. Bizarrely, all three main party leaders have spent time making mugs or painting mugs or doing some form of pottery. They've been in the Midlands, of course, after certainly Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak after last night's debate in Nottingham for the BBC. I've been there too overnight in the spin room for you yesterday, Michelle, of course. And today I interviewed Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, for GB News. And that interview airs in little in less than 25 minutes' time on this channel. So all viewers should stay tuned to GB News to hear what the PM had to say to our viewers. Of the bits we've released so far, I thought most fascinating was he said, Rishi Sunak said, that there's maybe 150,000 votes that could make a big difference to the result of the campaign. Clearly he's made change in the strategy. Rather than warning of an enormous Labour landslide, the new idea from Tory CTHQ is to target individuals in swing seats and see if they can turn the ship around, because currently we're looking at an enormous landslide for the Labour Party. So I think it could work here, maybe. They're hoping it will work anyway.
Stuff. I promise even I am going to stay tuned for that one, Christopher Herp. Thank you very much for that. Where are you at with all of this political debate in the run-up to the election? Are you still switched on? Are you still undecided? Do these kind of conversations and debates help shape your thinking, or have you already made up your mind? Get in touch and tell me after the break. Junior doctors striking again. Do you still support this or not? Tell me.
Hi there, time for the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Cool Atlantic winds return across the UK this weekend. That means blustery showers, especially for northern parts, but some drier and brighter interludes too, especially across southern parts. Low pressure, an unseasonably deep low, is now crossing northern Scotland. Around the south of that low, we've got these strong winds bringing unpleasant conditions really across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Spells of rain or showers continuing through the night. The strongest winds pushing through northern and northeast Scotland. Meanwhile, further south, it's mostly dry, apart from 1 or 2 showers for Wales and the southwest. Patchy cloud, but a cooler night for many of us, so 11 to 13 Celsius by dawn. Now we start the day with those winds and the outbreaks of rain continuing across northwest Scotland. The Northwest Highlands seeing prolonged and at times heavy rain, and the rain then sweeping into Orkney and Shetland later. Some shelter from the rain across eastern and southern Scotland, but a few showers here, brightening up across Northern Ireland compared with the last 24 hours. A few sunny spells, but also 1 or 2 showers. A few showers there for Wales, Northern England, perhaps the southwest, but the further southeast you are, the drier it will be, the brighter it will be. There'll be quite a lot of cloud, to be honest, across the UK during the day, but some brightness will develop, especially towards the southwest by the afternoon. Further north, any rain tends to break up into showers, but there will be some heavy downpours for the Highlands, Grampians, the northwest of Scotland, and that strong wind continues, making it feel on the cool side. In the south, where we've got some sunshine and lighter winds, 23 Celsius, so not too unpleasant. We start Saturday with a lot of fine weather, best of the sunshine the southeast, as well as parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. This finger of cloud pushes into northern and western England as well as Wales to bring some light rain by the afternoon. But for many this weekend is looking mostly settled, if a lot cooler compared with the weather of recent days.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. There are long queues heading north through the West Midlands up the M6 to the Castle Bromwich exit junction 5. Now, one lane stays closed after a van and a car collided. Long delays back to the M42 as a result. In Norfolk, just south of Loddon, the A146 remains shut. In Stockton and Hales on that short stretch of the Norwich Road at the scene of a multi-vehicle collision. Long delays on the western stretch of the M25 heading anti-clockwise, where the left lane is closed just before the M40. Emergency repairs are taking place at the carriageway after a car call via queues all the way back into Watford. And anti-clockwise through Kent, really slow towards the Dartford tunnels after a lorry broke down just south of the tunnels. And in Hampshire, the A259, the Havant Road, closed each way through Emsworth at the scene of a 2-vehicle collision. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello everybody, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel remains. I've got the former Tory Minister, Robert Halfon, and the former Labour Minister, Bill Rammell. Let's talk junior doctors, because, you know, in England, they are going to strike again. I mean, they started it again this morning. It's 5 days. You know the drill by now, don't you? They want a 35%, what they're calling pay restoration. They want to take their pay back, essentially, to 2008. This is their 11th strike, ladies and gents. I mean, I despair, really. We're in the middle of a heat wave. We're in the middle of a general election. Guys at home, do you still support this?
Well, we're talking about waiting lists earlier, and in the middle of an election, the junior doctors go on strike, which is going to cause masses of upset for millions of people who desperately need NHS.
But they'll say they're going on strike because
appointments.
you guys haven't sorted it out with them.
Well, we're spending 180 billion quid on the NHS. I'm proud of the record. That's, up a third in real terms since 2010. We've got it's like 48,000 more doctors, something like 78,000 more nurses in the NHS. Of course, there are problems, but you can't just give one group of people a 35% pay rise. And the problem with the Labour Party is that they say it's a bit like the chap we were talking about earlier, Robert. They say it's a terrible show, but they don't actually say, well, how much they're going to give them. And it'll be very interesting to see what happens. You can't just... of course, you've got to negotiate them, and we did negotiate with the nurses, and we've solved some of that dispute, but you can't say, well, people can have a 35% pay rise. Who in the country is getting a 35% pay rise? Nobody.
So what would you lot do then?
Well, I regret that the junior doctors are striking, especially during a general election campaign when neither the government or the opposition can negotiate with them. I don't think they needed to do this. We can't afford 35%. That's completely off the Richter scale. Robert says, what would we do? Would we be profligate? You've actually settled with other groups of health workers at 10, 15%, and that's creating the environment within which we're working. But what we do need to do is to get round the table with them. And Wes Streeting has said from day one of a Labour government, he'll be sitting down with them and resolving this strike action. But that won't be 35%. But I tell you this.
What will it be then? What do you think is a fair amount of money?
That's not the way negotiations work. You know it, and I know it.
You must know what you think is a reasonable amount of money.
Well, the government's already accepted 10 to 15% for other health workers. I think it's in that ballpark. But I tell you this, 13 years of a Labour government, we never had any strikes in the National Health Service because we funded it properly, we worked with the staff and we improved the system. And that's what we need to get back to.
Is that fair?
Well, I gave you the figures. We're spending...
Was there any strikes when Labour was in office?
We're spending, NHS spending is up a third in real terms, £180 billion, a huge amount of money. We've got many thousands more doctors and nurses, but we've got problems, legacy from COVID, because of all the people who were sadly denied appointments because of the COVID pandemic, millions of people, and that's why we have millions of people on the waiting list. They are making some progress with that, although there's a long way to go, and there's a lot of work to try and improve that, a lot of money that's being invested. But you can't just, if you say you're going to give doctors 35%, where does that money come from? It comes from the taxpayer, or you spend less elsewhere on the NHS because you've got to give that 35% to the junior doctors.
Can you help me understand something? Maybe I'm just overlooking something really basic. So these guys want pay restoration to 2008, right? But by my calculations, some of these people won't have even been even on starting as junior doctors in 2008. So they've become subsequently on that pathway, knowing the T's and C's as they were at the time. So how can you take a job knowing the T's and C's at the time and then suddenly go, hang on, despite the fact I've only just joined, I want to look backwards and I want my pay to go back to what it was before I was even there, despite the fact that I accepted it subsequently? What am I missing?
Because that's what trade unions do. And it's an argument. I don't think it's a persuasive argument. 35% is not deliverable. And I will say this, I think the British Medical Association have a track record of, let's just say, not negotiating reasonably on behalf of its members. Nevertheless, we need to get round a table and resolve these strikes because they're damaging and they're putting the service back. But one other thing to you, Robert, you said, it's all about the pandemic. Waiting lists were through the roof before the pandemic. It's because of the way the Tory government has underfunded the health service relatively over 14 years.
£180 billion is not underfunding. Going up a third in real terms is not underfunding.
And you know that the pace of technology and the ageing population means you need to spend more.
Thousands more doctors and nurses is not underfunding. And how much more money would the Labour Party... Are you saying how much more money would the Labour Party spend on the NHS?
Over a Parliament, we are determined to invest enough and reform enough to get waiting lists back to 18 weeks.
We've said we'd carry on increasing NHS spending in real terms in the way that we have done. We just announced a few £1 billion for NHS technology in the recent budget. So billions of pounds have been going into the NHS, but they're trying to. There's a lot of reform that needs to come through the system, rather than just saying, "Oh, yes, it's a problem because we haven't got more money."
You need both. You need reform and you need investment, and that's exactly what we had under the last Labour government.
Well, we've had it here. And 180 billion.
But you haven't delivered. 18 weeks maximum waiting time when we left office. 18 months under your watch.
Yeah, but hang on.
You're not, as I say, you're deliberately not including the reasons for this are because of the COVID pandemic.
At the heart of the, or one of the key strands of the Labour Party's plans for the NHS, it's all about leveraging technology. And you say about your great performance in last time he was in office, one of the biggest public sector IT failures that's cost us taxpayers, depending on which estimates you look at, some would say it's £10+ billion, was under a Labour government when it came to them trying to modernise the NHS using technology.
Gordon Brown's PFI deal saddled hospitals.
Do you know what?
Debt.
Governments of all political persuasions have not been great with IT, and we need to get better in that, and we need to get smarter in that. And there've been failures under the Conservatives, and there were failures under the last
I'm
government.
telling you, both of you gents, nice people, but there'll be so many people watching this wanting to headbutt my desk because they will say that we just need change. We just need something that is change. I'm using your strap lines now. Could be a campaigner for you, couldn't I, using your words?
But do you know what, Michelle? Don't judge politicians by what they say. Judge them by what they do. And the figures
I am. That's why I'm telling you. Yeah. That's why I'm telling the pair of you that you're both abysmal, your parties, when it comes to immigration. I'm telling the pair of you that what you've done to things like the NHS is appalling. I'm telling you that when you talk about IT and improving IT, I'm judging you on your track record, which is you created the worst public sector IT failure that we've had in this country in the NHS.
With respect, you're not judging us on our record, because when we left office, maximum waits were 18 weeks.
I'm judging you on your deployment of technology record.
I'm talking about health outcomes and the service, and we had the highest satisfaction levels in history.
Private financial initiative. The PFI, Gordon Brown's been
and we got 100 new hospitals from it.
But hold on, you, because you was, I thought it was your party that introduced PFI, whilst it was your party that massively rolled it out.
No, Robert,
it was Gordon Brown.
You know that's completely untrue. It was John Major who introduced the PFI.
Please, who extended PFI across the hospitals? Gordon Brown.
This is what I'm saying. It's the pair of you at fault. It's the Labour Party and the Tories. Goodness gracious me, we're going to fight it out.
Well, I'm proud of
in the break.
I'm proud of the thousands of more nurses and doctors that we've had.
We will see you in 2 minutes. I have got to say, in fact, you know what? I'll tell you in a second about Joe Biden. We are counting down to Joe Biden and Donald Trump's first in-person showdown of the 2024 election campaign. Do not miss the US presidential debate live here on GB News at 2 a.m. Friday. We'll see you in 2.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Giovani is axed following growing allegations of threatening and abusive behaviour.
We won't see his little toes dancing around the dance floor again, which is a shame.
Was it the BBC saying, you know, we've had some bad publicity about this star, do we need to maybe let him go? Or was it Giovani himself saying that, you know, he's had to, with all the bad publicity and what's the allegations against him, he's walked away? We don't exactly know. But what we do know is that Amanda Abingdon, who he was coupled with last year on the last series of Strictly, left claiming that she had nasty behaviour from him in rehearsals when they were training for their routines. And she's also been diagnosed with PTSD, which she is blaming or claiming happened because of the training that she was put under Giovani. It's very sad because I've met Giovani on quite a few occasions, and he comes across as a very nice gentleman, actually, and the fans absolutely love him. And even though the allegations are out there against him, everybody I speak to in terms of the fans are on his side.
I mean, from the fans' point of view, they don't see what goes on behind the scenes. All they see is an incredibly gifted dancer who we're seeing footage of now.
It might come out later, but there's all sorts of things coming out because after Amanda came out and claimed all this behaviour against him, a male celebrity last week also came out and voice their opinion. Yeah, a lot of fans will be gutted, but as you say, we don't know the full story yet as what's gone on.
And it's incredible pressure that no one's allowed to be, a duffer right from the start now.
I mean, it's one thing learning lines if you're an actor, but it's a different kettle of fish altogether if you're learning moves that you've never done before. So you've got...
The People's Channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewbittle, former Tory Minister Robert Halfon and the former Labour Minister Bill Rammell alongside me. In the break, we were actually just talking about electioneering. Bill was saying if he wasn't here tonight, he'd be knocking on doors. That's why he's got such a good tan. That's what he's been doing these last few days. And I was saying I don't like it when people knock on my door. I find it an invasion. And then we were just also talking about the disadvantage that smaller parties, start-up parties are at because there's just no data. You guys, the bigger parties, the established parties, you have reams and reams of data. You know who's who, what's where, how to get people turning out. Where start-up parties, they're literally starting from scratch.
It is true. In that sense, it's not a level playing field. But I was just sharing with you, both Robert's party and my party in Harlow have got 30 years' worth of data on the electorate, and you target.
Yeah, because 6 months of the year, we have local elections every year, so we're knocking on doors, getting, finding out what voters think. So we have all that information, and then the job is to get them out.
Well, yeah. Will you be
day.
turning out to vote? Obviously, it's a week today. Will you be turning out? I can't wait, actually. I can't wait for it all to be done and dusted.
I think all of us feel like that.
I know some of you, I think, as well, will feel exactly the same about that. Again, this PFI conversation has come up a lot with you guys at home tonight about, we're just talking about that. The PFI, people are really not happy about that situation, and that is something now that still causes problems for the NHS. Do you think that this was, on reflection, wrong moves?
Well, let's set the history straight, Robert. It was introduced under John Major's government. We carried it on and extended it, and bluntly, we got better the longer it went on in the design of the contract.
It was a very tiny initiative under John Major and Ken Clarke. It was massively rolled out under Gordon Brown, the PFI. It's saddled with hospitals with huge debts that they're still paying off, and there are loads. Don't believe me. Look up Google. There's loads and loads of articles about this that have written about the PFI scandals that went on under Labour, and the hospitals are still paying off to this day. It was a disaster.
Well, I've got to tell you,
but it delivered 100 new hospitals. How many have you delivered under this government?
Saddled hospitals with debt that they couldn't then run properly because they're busy paying the debt. So they couldn't. Everything is about paying the debt to the PFI rather than running the hospital. I mean, that's like saying, well, you build a house, you build a lot of houses, but people can't live in them because they can't pay the mortgage.
But you know and I know the reason for PFI was to get round the public finance rules so that PFI schemes were outside of the traditional public sector capital schemes. And yes, there needed to be reform, and we did get better at the PFI contracts. But it is a reality that we built 100 new hospitals that are serving people in this country. There's been 3 or 4 under this government.
Just type in PFI scandals under, and all the think tanks, the King's.
How many new hospitals under this government?
That's what these two are going to do in a minute. These two are going to carry on talking about PFI. You can Google it to your heart's content. I can tell you now, many people are divided on pretty much every single one of these topics tonight. I stand by what I said. I think too many people are very bored of what many would call a uni-party.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, time for the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Cool Atlantic winds return across the UK this weekend. That means blustery showers, especially for northern parts, but some drier and brighter interludes too, especially across southern parts. Low pressure, an unseasonably deep low, is now crossing northern Scotland. Around the south of that low, we've got these strong winds bringing unpleasant conditions really across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Spells of rain or showers continuing through the night. The strongest winds pushing through northern and northeast Scotland. Meanwhile, further south, it's mostly dry, apart from 1 or 2 showers for Wales and the southwest. Patchy cloud, but a cooler night for many of us, so 11 to 13 Celsius by dawn. Now we start the day with those winds and the outbreaks of rain continuing across northwest Scotland. The Northwest Highlands seeing prolonged and at times heavy rain, and the rain then sweeping into Orkney and Shetland later. Some shelter from the rain across eastern and southern Scotland, but a few showers here, brightening up across Northern Ireland compared with the last 24 hours. A few sunny spells, but also 1 or 2 showers. A few showers there for Wales, Northern England, perhaps the southwest, but the further southeast you are, the drier it will be, the brighter it will be. There'll be quite a lot of cloud, to be honest, across the UK during the day, but some brightness will develop, especially towards the southwest by the afternoon. Further north, any rain tends to break up into showers, but there will be some heavy downpours for the Highlands, Grampians, the northwest of Scotland, and that strong wind continues, making it feel on the cool side. In the south, where we've got some sunshine and lighter winds, 23 Celsius, so not too unpleasant. We start Saturday with a lot of fine weather, best of the sunshine the southeast, as well as parts of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. This finger of cloud pushes into northern and western England as well as Wales to bring some light rain by the afternoon. But for many this weekend is looking mostly settled, if a lot cooler compared with the weather of recent days.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long queues towards Belfast. The A12 partly blocked, the vans broken down with queues back onto the M1. Long delays on the M62 westbound in West Yorkshire after an earlier crash just south of Bradford at the Chain Bar interchange. All lanes are back open, still taking just under an hour back to the M1. Really slow heading north up the M6 through the West Midlands after a van and a car collided earlier on at the Castle Bromwich exit junction 5. Really heavy on the western stretch of the M25 anti-clockwise after a car caught fire just before the M40. Long delays on the M25 heading anti-clockwise out of Kent into Essex after a breakdown was blocking the left-hand Dartford tunnel. All lanes are back open. Ringwood Road blocked northbound at Bournemouth by an accident, and trains are still majorly disrupted out of Leicester to Peterborough and Leicester to Nottingham following earlier signalling problems at Syston. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you can win big this summer. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your